The library was silent except for the soft swish of a feather duster against leather spines when Elena Whitmore hit the marble floor. One moment she was reaching for the top shelf, the next her knees buckled, her vision tunneled to black, and gravity claimed her like a debt finally called due. The duster tumbled from her fingers. Her body followed, a whisper of fabric and bone meeting stone with a sound that should have been louder, that deserved to be louder, but wasn't. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're here with me today because this one's going to shake you. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button because trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. This is the kind of story that reminds us why we should never take anyone for granted, especially the people right in front of us. Now, let me take you into that library. Harrison Kapoor didn't hear the fall. He was 40 feet away in his office, noise-canceling headphones sealed over his ears, eyes locked on 3 monitors displaying stock tickers that meant more to him than most human interactions. He'd built an empire by the age of 35, tech infrastructure, real estate, venture capital, and maintained it by caring about numbers, not noise. The woman who cleaned his 12,000-square-foot mansion every morning was noise. Furniture that moved. Wallpaper that occasionally coughed. He couldn't have picked her out of a lineup. Couldn't have said if she was 25 or 50, brunette or blonde, married or single. She arrived at 7, left by 3, and the house was always immaculate. That was the only detail that mattered. For 6 months, this had been their arrangement. 6 months of her moving through his space like a ghost, and him treating her like one. He never looked up from his phone when she entered a room. Never acknowledged the fresh coffee she left by his desk each morning, or the way his favorite shirts appeared pressed and hanging in his closet without him ever remembering to ask. She existed in his peripheral vision, a function rather than a person, and that was exactly how Harrison Kapoor preferred his world: efficient, transactional, uncomplicated by the mess of humanity. But efficiency has a cost, and Harrison was about to learn the price. At 2:47 p.m., he pulled off his headphones to take a call. That's when he heard it, or rather, didn't hear it. The house was too quiet. The usual background hum of movement, the distant sound of a vacuum or running water, had vanished. He glanced at his watch. She should still be here. She always worked until 3. Irritation flickered first. Had she left early? Was something not cleaned? He stood, straightened his Tom Ford shirt, and walked out into the corridor. Hello. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings, bouncing back at him unanswered. Harrison moved through the house, checking rooms with the methodical precision he applied to everything. Kitchen, spotless, empty. Living room, perfect, vacant. He was about to return to his office when he passed the library and saw the door ajar. He pushed it open and froze. She was lying on her side near the bookshelf, one arm stretched toward a fallen duster just beyond her reach, as if she'd tried to grab it even as consciousness fled. Her uniform, pale blue, he noticed for the first time, was twisted around her small frame. Her face, turned toward him, was gray. Not pale. Gray. For 3 seconds, Harrison's billion-dollar brain couldn't process what he was seeing. It was too out of place, too wrong, like finding a crack in reality itself. Then training kicked in. Not business training, but something deeper, more human, something he thought he'd successfully suffocated years ago. He was across the room in 4 strides, dropping to his knees beside her, fingers fumbling for his phone. 911, what's your emergency? There's a woman. She's collapsed. She's not moving. I don't. His voice cracked. When had he last sounded like that? Afraid? Is she breathing, sir? He leaned close, felt the faintest whisper of air against his cheek. Yes, barely. I'm sending paramedics to your location now. Stay with her. Don't move her. Is she injured? I don't know. I don't. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. And what he saw made his stomach drop. Her cheekbones were too prominent. Her wrists, where they emerged from her sleeves, were frighteningly thin. Dark circles under her eyes looked like bruises. How had he not seen this? How had he walked past this woman every single day and not noticed she was wasting away? Sir, stay on the line with me. Help is 3 minutes out. 3 minutes. Harrison had built companies in less time, closed deals worth millions in seconds. But these 3 minutes stretched like hours. He found himself kneeling there on his perfect marble floor, beside a woman whose name he didn't even know, feeling something he'd spent a decade trying to avoid, helpless. Her eyelids fluttered. A small sound escaped her lips. Not quite a word, not quite a breath. "Don't move," he said, and his hand, without permission from his brain, reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "Help is coming. Just hold on." Her eyes opened halfway, unfocused, glassy. They drifted past him like he wasn't there, like she was looking at something beyond this room, beyond this moment. Then they closed again. Outside, sirens wailed closer. Harrison had never been so grateful to hear that sound in his life. The paramedics burst through his front door. He'd left it open, he realized, didn't even remember doing that. And suddenly his library was full of people and equipment and urgent voices throwing around words he didn't understand. Hypotension, tachycardia, severe malnutrition. "How long has she been like this?" one of them asked while another started in 4. "I don't know. I just found her." "You're her employer?" Harrison nodded. "How long has she worked for you?" 6 months. The paramedic looked up at him, and Harrison saw the judgment in his eyes before the man looked away. Has she seemed ill? Complained of anything? Had she? Harrison's mind raced backward through 6 months of deliberately not paying attention. Had there been signs? Had she tried to tell him something, and he'd brushed past her? The guilt hit him like a physical blow. "I don't know," he whispered. And that, he was about to discover, was the most damning answer he could give. So what do you think happens next? Drop your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this incredible journey. They loaded her onto the stretcher with practiced efficiency, and Harrison found himself following them to the ambulance without deciding to. One of the paramedics turned, hand up to stop him. "Family only, sir. I'm her employer." Still not family. Harrison watched the ambulance doors close on her gray face, watched the vehicle pull away down his circular driveway, past the fountain he'd never used, through the gates that cost more than most people's houses. Then he was standing alone in his doorway, a billionaire in a 12,000 square foot mansion, and he'd never felt smaller in his life. He went back inside, back to the library. The feather duster still lay on the floor where it had fallen. He picked it up. When had he last held a cleaning tool? And something crinkled in his palm. A piece of paper, folded small, tucked into the handle. His hands shook as he unfolded it. The handwriting was delicate, cramped, like someone trying to make every inch of paper count. Grocery list. Rice, beans, bread, cheapest. Call St. Mary's about payment plan. Reschedule Dr. Chen. Can't afford this month. Night shift 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Morning shift 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Pick up medicine if anything left over. There was more, but Harrison couldn't read it. His vision had blurred. When had he last cried? He couldn't remember. Didn't want to remember. But this grocery list from a woman who was starving herself. This schedule that left no room for sleep. This note about skipping doctor's appointments. It broke something in him he didn't know could still break. He pulled out his phone and called his executive assistant. "Nancy, I need you to find out everything about my housekeeper." "Your housekeeper, sir?" "Yes. Name, address, medical history, family, everything. And I need it in the next hour." "Mr. Kapoor, it's 3 p.m. on a Friday." "Nancy." His voice came out harder than he intended. "This is more important than anything on my schedule. Cancel everything. I need this information now." There was a pause. "Of course, sir. I'll get right on it." 53 minutes later, his phone rang. "Her name is Elena Whitmore," Nancy said without preamble. 31 years old. She came to the U.S. from Romania 7 years ago on a work visa, got her green card 3 years ago. No family in the country. Parents deceased. One younger brother back in Bucharest, enrolled in medical school. She's been sending him money for tuition. Harrison sank into his desk chair. 31. She was only 4 years younger than him. He'd imagined her older, somehow. More, invisible. "She works 3 jobs, Nancy continued, and Harrison could hear papers rustling. Your house from 7 to 3, a restaurant from 4 to 10, and overnight custodial at an office building downtown. That's 7 days a week, Mr. Kapoor. No days off." Jesus. The word slipped out. "There's more. She was diagnosed with a chronic autoimmune condition 18 months ago. Requires medication and regular monitoring. Her work visa insurance lapsed when she switched jobs, and she hasn't been able to afford the treatment. The medicine alone is $1,200 a month." Harrison's throat tightened. He spent more than that on wine, on shoes, on things he never used and didn't need. Which hospital did they take her to? I called around. She's at Mercy General. He was on his feet before Nancy finished the sentence. Thank you. Take the rest of the day off. Sir, are you? He hung up, grabbed his keys, and for the first time in years, Harrison Kapoor left work in the middle of the day for something that wasn't a business deal. Mercy General's emergency room smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Harrison approached the reception desk, and the woman behind it looked up with the exhausted patience of someone who'd heard every story twice. I'm here about Elena Whitmore. She was brought in about an hour ago. Are you family? I'm her employer. The receptionist's expression flickered with something, disapproval, pity, before settling back into professional neutrality. She's being evaluated. You'll need to wait. He waited. For the first time in his adult life, Harrison Kapoor sat in a plastic chair and waited without his phone, without his laptop, without anything to distract him from the realization of what he'd done. Or rather, what he hadn't done. He'd built an empire on the principle of seeing opportunities others missed, of noticing patterns in chaos. But he'd trained himself to see only what mattered to profit margins and market shares. He'd made himself blind to everything else. And Elena Whitmore had paid the price for his deliberate blindness. Around him, the ER hummed with human suffering. A child with a broken arm. An elderly man clutching his chest. A woman pacing, phone pressed to her ear, tears streaming down her face. Real people with real problems. And for 6 months Harrison had floated above it all in his mansion, convinced that keeping the world at arm's length made him strong. It had only made him cruel. Mr. Kapoor? He jerked up. A doctor stood before him, clipboard in hand, dark circles under her eyes that reminded him painfully of Elena. Yes. How is she? Dr. Sarah Foster. I'm treating Ms. Whitmore. She sat down beside him, which somehow felt more ominous than if she'd stayed standing. She's stable, but barely. She's severely malnourished, dehydrated, and her autoimmune condition has progressed significantly without treatment. Her body has been eating itself, trying to keep going. Another week, maybe 2. She trailed off, but Harrison understood. Another week, and Elena Whitmore would have died on his library floor. She's been working herself to death, Dr. Foster continued quietly. Literally. Her body's been in crisis mode for months. The collapse was her system finally giving out. Can I see her? Dr. Foster studied him with those tired, knowing eyes. She's been asking for something. Kept mumbling about it, even semi-conscious. Do you know what Friday check means? Harrison's stomach dropped. Today was Friday. Payday. Elena had collapsed on his floor, and her first worry was about making sure she got paid. I'll take care of it, he said, his voice hoarse. She needs to stay at least a week. Maybe more. The treatment and hospital stay. Dr. Foster hesitated. Does she have insurance through you? Harrison thought of the independent contractor agreement his lawyers had drawn up. Minimum wage, no benefits, no insurance. Legal. Efficient. Monstrous. No, he whispered. But I'll cover everything. Everything. I don't care what it costs. Dr. Foster's expression softened slightly. Room 847. But Mr. Kapoor? She's going to need more than money. She's going to need time to heal. Rest. Someone who actually gives a damn. She walked away, leaving Harrison sitting there with a truth he couldn't escape. He'd been given 6 months to see Elena Whitmore as a human being, and he'd failed spectacularly. But maybe it wasn't too late to start. Room 847 was at the end of a long corridor that smelled like sterile hope and quiet defeat. Harrison stood outside the door for a full minute before he could make himself push it open. Elena looked smaller in the hospital bed, if that was even possible, and 4 drip fed into her left arm. Monitors beeped softly, tracking a heartbeat that had almost stopped beating. Her eyes were closed, dark lashes stark against skin that was still too gray, too fragile. Harrison pulled up a chair and sat. He'd negotiated with CEOs, faced down hostile boardrooms, stared down competitors worth billions. But sitting next to this dying woman he'd treated like furniture. This was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, they were unfocused, lost. Then they found him, and something like panic flashed across her face. Mr. Kapoor. Her voice was barely a whisper, rough from intubation. I'm so sorry. The library. I didn't finish the library. And your office. I didn't vacuum. Elena. Her name felt foreign on his tongue. Stop. Please. But it's Friday. I need my check. I have to get to my other job by 4, and she tried to sit up. The monitors screamed. A nurse rushed in. Ms. Whitmore, you need to stay down. The nurse gently pressed her back against the pillows, adjusted something on the floor, looked at Harrison with a pointed expression. She needs rest. Keep it brief. When they were alone again, Elena's eyes had filled with tears. I'm going to lose my jobs. All of them. I can't afford to lose them. My brother, his tuition is due next month, and your brother's tuition is paid. The words came out before Harrison had consciously decided to say them. I took care of it. Full ride. For years. Elena stared at him like he'd spoken in a language she didn't understand. What? While you were being evaluated, I made some calls. Your brother, Adrian, right? He's covered. Tuition, room, board, books, everything. But why would you? Her voice cracked. You don't even know me. And there it was. The truth that had been choking him since he found her on his floor. No, Harrison said quietly. I don't. And that's my fault. A tear slipped down her cheek. Then another. I can't accept that. It's too much. I don't take charity. It's not charity. Harrison leaned forward, desperate to make her understand something he'd only just understood himself. Elena, you've been killing yourself working for me. For 6 months, you came to my house every single day, and I never once looked at you. Never asked if you were okay. Never noticed you were dying right in front of me. That wasn't your job. It was exactly my job. I'm a human being. You're a human being. That makes it my job. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling more lost than he had in years. The money for your brother? That's not charity. That's me paying a debt I didn't know I owed. Elena closed her eyes, fresh tears streaming silently down her face. I was so tired, she whispered. So tired all the time. But I couldn't stop. If I stopped, Adrian would have to leave school. Come back to Romania. Everything Mom and Dad worked for would be gone. How long? Harrison asked. How long have you been sick? 18 months since the diagnosis. But I felt wrong for a year before that. Just kept pushing through. Thought I was weak. Thought if I just worked harder, tried harder. She opened her eyes, and they were full of something Harrison recognized, shame. I thought if I was strong enough, my body would listen. Harrison thought of all the times he'd pushed through exhaustion, ignored warning signs, treated his body like a machine he could override with willpower. He'd just had the money to afford the consequences. The doctors say you need at least 2 weeks here. Maybe more. Fresh panic flooded her face. 2 weeks. I can't. The hospital bills alone will. Covered. All of it. And Elena. He waited until she met his eyes. You're not going back to 3 jobs. You're not going back to any job until you're actually healthy. I can't afford. You're on paid medical leave. Full salary. And when you do come back, it'll be with health insurance, benefits, and reasonable hours. He paused. If you want to come back, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. Elena stared at him for a long moment. Who are you? She finally asked. Because the man who just said all that, he doesn't sound like the man I've been working for. It was a fair question. Harrison wasn't sure he knew the answer himself. Maybe, he said slowly. I'm the man I should have been all along. Before Elena could respond, the door burst open. A young man rushed in, dark hair wild, eyes wide with terror. He looked so much like Elena that Harrison knew immediately who he was. Lena. The young man grabbed Elena's hand, speaking rapid Romanian that Harrison couldn't understand but felt in his chest anyway. The fear, the love, the desperation. Adrian. Elena's voice broke. How did you? You're supposed to be in Bucharest. Mr. Kapoor called me. Adrian turned to Harrison, and his eyes were blazing. You called me and told me my sister was dying. That you'd pay for my flight. That I needed to come now. Harrison didn't remember making that call. But he must have. Somewhere between finding Elena's file and arriving at the hospital, he must have called her brother. His body had moved on autopilot while his mind tried to process what he'd done, what he'd failed to do, for 6 months. You didn't tell me, Adrian said to Elena, his voice cracking with betrayal. You didn't tell me you were sick, that you were working yourself to death for my school. I couldn't. Elena's tears came harder now. You have 1 year left. 1 year, and you'll be a doctor. Mom and Dad's dream. Mom and Dad are dead. Adrian's shout echoed off the walls. But you're alive, Lena. You're supposed to be alive. He sank into the chair beside her bed, his anger crumbling into grief. I can't lose you too. I can't. Harrison stood, suddenly feeling like an intruder in a moment too intimate for his presence. But as he moved toward the door, Elena's voice stopped him. "Mr. Kapoor." "Wait." He turned. "Thank you," she said simply. "For calling him. For seeing me." Harrison nodded, not trusting his voice. As he left the room, he heard Adrian speaking softly in Romanian, heard Elena's quiet responses. The sound of family, of love, of people who actually mattered to each other. Outside in the corridor, Harrison leaned against the wall and finally let himself feel the full weight of what had almost happened. If he'd worked 1 hour later, if he hadn't taken off his headphones, if Elena had collapsed anywhere but his house, she would have died alone in some apartment with no one to call an ambulance. She would have died, and Harrison would have simply hired another maid, would have moved on without ever knowing her name. His phone buzzed. A text from Nancy. "Sir, there are 47 urgent messages. The Tokyo deal needs your signature. The board meeting." Harrison deleted the message. Then he turned off his phone. For the first time in a decade, the world could wait. He had something more important to do. Figure out how to be the kind of man who deserved a second chance. The story is taking a turn, isn't it? What do you think Harrison should do next? Drop your thoughts below. Harrison didn't go home that night. Or the next. He checked into a hotel 3 blocks from Mercy General and found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. Thinking about someone other than himself. On day 3, he showed up at Elena's room with coffee. Real coffee, not hospital sludge, and found Adrian asleep in the chair beside her bed, his hand still holding his sister's. Elena was awake, staring at the ceiling with an expression Harrison was learning to recognize: guilt. "You should go home," she said when she noticed him. Not hello, not good morning. Just another attempt to push him away, to minimize the space she took up in the world. "I don't want to." Harrison set the coffee on the table, pulled up a second chair. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The doctors say the treatment is working." She paused. "They also told me how much it costs. Per day." "Elena, it's $8,000 a day, Mr. Kapoor." $8,000. "I've been here 3 days." "That's not your problem." Harrison kept his voice gentle but firm. "We had an agreement, remember? I cover everything until you're healthy." "I never agreed to that." "Well, I'm deciding for both of us then." He leaned back, studied her. Color was returning to her face, slowly. The gray had faded to something closer to pale. "Besides, I have a question for you." Elena looked wary. "What?" "When you come back to work, if you come back, what would you change? About the job, I mean. If you could change anything." She blinked, clearly not expecting that. I don't understand." "Humor me. If you were designing your ideal job, what would it look like?" For a long moment, Elena just stared at him. Then, slowly, carefully, like she was defusing a bomb. "Hours that let me sleep. A wage that covers rent and food. Maybe health insurance." She said the last part like it was a fantasy too absurd to voice. "What about the work itself? Do you like cleaning? Does anyone like cleaning?" But there was something in her voice, not quite defensiveness, but close to it. "That's not an answer." Elena was quiet for a moment. Adrian shifted in his sleep, murmured something in Romanian. She watched him with such tenderness that Harrison felt like an intruder again. "I like making spaces beautiful," she finally said. "I like taking something chaotic and making it peaceful. When I'm cleaning, when I'm arranging things just right, it's like I'm creating tiny pockets of order in a messy world." She glanced at Harrison, embarrassed. "That sounds stupid." "No," Harrison said quietly. "It sounds like you're an artist." Elena laughed, but it was bitter. "Artists don't scrub toilets. Artists create beauty wherever they can. You just described your work the way a sculptor talks about marble." Harrison leaned forward. "What if I told you I wanted to hire you for a different position? Not a maid. A home manager. Someone who oversees the estate, makes decisions about design and organization, manages other staff." "I'm not qualified." "You've been doing it for 6 months already. You just weren't getting paid or respected for it." He pulled out his phone, opened a document. "I had my lawyers draw up a new contract. Salary is $85,000 a year, full benefits, 4 weeks vacation, reasonable hours. You'd have an assistant to help with the actual cleaning. Your job would be to make decisions, not break your back." Elena stared at the phone like it might bite her. $85,000? It's what the position is worth. What you're worth. "I can't," her voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" It was the same question she'd asked before, and Harrison still didn't have a perfect answer. But he had a truer one than he'd had 3 days ago. Because I spent my whole life believing that success meant not caring, he said. That the only way to build an empire was to treat people as assets, not humans. And then you collapsed on my floor, and I realized I'd built myself a prison made of money and called it freedom. Elena's eyes glistened. So I'm what? Your redemption project? The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Maybe, Harrison admitted. But does that make the offer less real? You deserve this, Elena. You've always deserved this. I just need you to see it. Before Elena could respond, Adrian woke up. He looked at Harrison with eyes that were far too knowing for someone who'd been asleep seconds ago. You're still here, Adrian said in accented but perfect English. I'm still here. Why? It was a challenge, not a question. Adrian had every right to be suspicious. Harrison had called him, paid for his flight, but Adrian had also had 3 days to hear the full story from his sister. 3 days to understand that the man sitting across from him had nearly killed Elena through nothing more than indifference. Because I care, Harrison said simply. You didn't care 3 days ago. You're right. I didn't. And I'll have to live with that. Harrison met Adrian's glare without flinching. But I care now. And I'm going to keep caring, whether your sister lets me help her or not. Adrian studied him for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he stood, stretched, looked at Elena with an expression that said they'd talk about this later. I need coffee. Real coffee. You want me to bring you anything, Lena? Just come back, Elena said softly. After Adrian left, the room fell into heavy silence. Harrison could hear the distant sounds of the hospital. Beeping monitors, squeaking carts, muffled conversations. The machinery of saving lives. He doesn't trust you, Elena said finally. He shouldn't. I haven't earned it. But you want to. It wasn't a question, but Harrison answered anyway. Yes. Elena looked down at her hands, at the 4 still taped to her arm. My whole life, I've taken care of other people. My parents when they got sick. Adrian. My employers. I don't know how to let someone take care of me. Then we'll figure it out together. Harrison stood, preparing to leave before he overstayed his welcome. Think about the job offer. No pressure. You have all the time you need to decide. Harrison. It was the first time she'd used his first name. The sound of it stopped him in the doorway. Thank you, she said, for seeing me. Finally seeing me. He nodded, not trusting his voice, and walked out into the corridor. As he passed the nurse's station, one of them, an older woman with kind eyes, caught his attention. You're Elena's employer, right? Yes. She smiled. I've worked here 20 years. Seen a lot of people come through these doors. Most employers? They show up once, sign some papers, disappear. You've been here every day. She paused. Whatever happened between you two, you're making it right. That's rare. Harrison wanted to tell her that making it right was impossible. That you couldn't undo 6 months of cruelty with a few days of attention. But before he could say anything, his phone rang. Nancy. He'd been ignoring her calls for 3 days. He answered. Nancy, I can't talk right now. Sir, you need to come to the office. There's a situation with the Tokyo deal. The board is threatening to vote you out if you don't. Let them. Silence on the other end. Then, sir, did you just say? Let them vote me out. If the price of my position is ignoring people who are dying, then I don't want it. He hung up, turned off his phone, and felt, for the first time in his entire adult life, like he might actually become someone worth knowing. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on Monday. Harrison showed up at 8:55 a.m., walked into the conference room, and immediately knew he'd underestimated how badly he'd miscalculated. 12 board members sat around the table. Every single one of them looked ready for blood. Harrison, Richard Chun, the chairman, didn't bother with pleasantries. You've been unreachable for 5 days. 5 days. Do you have any idea what you've cost this company? I've been at a hospital. We know. Your assistant told us. Richard's voice dripped with contempt. You've been playing Florence Nightingale with your housemaid while our Tokyo partnership collapsed. $300 million, Harrison. That's what your little crisis of conscience cost us. Harrison sat down slowly. He'd expected anger. He hadn't expected the deal to actually fall apart. What happened? What happened? Margaret Ross, the CFO, laughed without humor. You disappeared. No calls, no emails, nothing. Our partners thought you'd had a breakdown. They pulled out and went with Zenith Tech instead. We can rebuild. Can we? Richard leaned forward. Because from where I'm sitting, our CEO just proved he's unreliable. That he'll abandon a $300 million deal to play hero for someone he pays minimum wage. The words hit Harrison like physical blows. But underneath the shock, something else stirred: clarity. Her name is Elena, he said quietly. Elena Whitmore. She's 31 years old. She has a brother in medical school. And she almost died because we created a system where people have to choose between their health and survival. This is not a charity, Harrison. No, it's a company built on the backs of people we refuse to see. Harrison stood, walked to the window. The city stretched out below, glittering and heartless. How many Elenas work in this building, Richard? How many people are one paycheck away from disaster? One medical emergency away from death? That's not our problem. It's exactly our problem. Harrison spun around, and the force of his voice made several board members flinch. We built this empire by telling ourselves that profits matter more than people. That success means ignoring the human cost. And I believed it. God help me. I believed it so completely that I let a woman work herself to death in my own house and never once asked if she was okay. Harrison, Margaret's voice was gentler now. We understand you're going through something. Maybe you need time off. A vacation. Therapy. I don't need therapy. I need to stop being the kind of man who built this company. He looked around the table, saw the confusion, the judgment, the barely concealed contempt. I'm proposing a complete restructuring of our employment practices. Living wages for all employees, including contractors. Full health benefits. Maximum work hours. Independent audits to ensure compliance. The room exploded. That's financial suicide. Our shareholders will revolt. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Harrison's voice cut through the chaos. And if you won't support it, then I'll resign. Today. Right now. Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Richard stood slowly. You're willing to throw away everything you built for a maid? I'm willing to throw away everything I built on exploitation and call it what it always was: wrong. Then you're a fool. Richard gathered his papers. The board will vote on your removal this afternoon. I suggest you use the time to reconsider this insanity. They filed out one by one, leaving Harrison alone in the conference room he'd designed himself. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A table that cost $40,000. Art on the walls worth more than Elena had earned in a lifetime. He'd built a monument to success. And it was hollow. His phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. Lena's asking for you. Something's wrong. Harrison ran. He burst into Elena's hospital room to find doctors surrounding her bed, monitors screaming. Adrian backed into a corner with terror written across his face. What's happening? Harrison grabbed the nearest doctor. Dr. Foster, he realized. Her body's rejecting the treatment, Dr. Foster said, already moving back to Elena's bedside. We're trying to stabilize her, but what? Dr. Foster's eyes were grave. There's an experimental treatment. New, expensive, not approved by insurance. It's her best shot, but it's $200,000 up front. The hospital can't front that kind of money for experimental procedures. Harrison didn't hesitate. Do it. Whatever she needs. I'll wire the money in 10 minutes. Harrison. Elena's voice was weak, barely audible over the machines. The doctors parted, and he saw her, gray again, slipping away again. Don't. It's too much. I can't ask. You're not asking. I'm deciding. He moved to her bedside, took her hand. It was cold. Too cold. Elena, listen to me. I spent my whole life making the wrong choices. Let me make one right one. Please. Tears slipped down her temples. Why do you care so much? You didn't even know my name a week ago. And there it was. The question he'd been avoiding. The truth he'd been dancing around since she collapsed on his floor. Because somewhere between finding you dying and watching you fight to live, I realized something. Harrison said, his voice breaking. I realized that I don't want to be the man who built an empire. I want to be the man who deserves to know someone like you. Elena's eyes widened. Harrison, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm not expecting gratitude or forgiveness or anything. I just need you to let me help you. Not because I feel guilty, but because, he stopped, swallowed hard. Because you matter. You matter more than any deal, any company, any amount of money. Sir, Dr. Foster interrupted gently. We need to start now if we're going to do this. Harrison looked at Elena. Do I have your permission? For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then, slowly, she nodded. Save her, Harrison told Dr. Foster. Then he stepped back, pulled out his phone, and made the transfer that would either save Elena's life or prove insufficient to the universe's cruelty. $200,000. Gone in 30 seconds. He'd spent more on cars he never drove. Adrian appeared at his elbow. You love her. It wasn't a question. Harrison started to deny it, then stopped. When had he become someone who lied to make things easier? I don't know her well enough to love her, he said honestly. But I think I could. Given time. Given the chance. He glanced at Adrian. If she'll let me. Adrian studied him with those two knowing eyes. She won't make it easy. Lena doesn't trust people who have power over her. She's been hurt too many times. I don't want power over her. I want. Harrison paused, trying to find words for something he'd never felt before. I want to be worthy of her trust, even if it takes years, even if she never gives it to me. Good answer, Adrian said softly. Then, the board. They're going to destroy you for this, aren't they? Harrison thought of the vote happening in a few hours. The empire he'd built crumbling because he'd finally found something more important than money. Probably, he admitted. Was it worth it? Harrison looked through the window at Elena, surrounded by doctors fighting to save her life. Fighting because he'd made it possible. Because for once, he'd chosen right. Yes, he said. It was worth everything. The experimental treatment took 6 hours. Harrison spent every minute of it in the waiting room, watching the clock tick forward like an executioner counting down. Adrian sat beside him, silent, both of them trapped in their own private hells. At hour 4, Nancy appeared in the doorway. Harrison looked up, and the expression on her face told him everything he needed to know before she said a word. The vote happened, she said quietly. I'm sorry, Harrison. It was unanimous. Unanimous. The word tasted like ash. Even Margaret? Nancy nodded. Richard's already named himself interim CEO. Security has been instructed to remove you from the building if you return. Harrison laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the waiting room walls. 12 years. I spent 12 years building that company, and it took them 4 hours to erase me. There's more. Nancy sat down, and Harrison noticed for the first time how exhausted she looked. Had she always looked this tired? Richard's first action was to reverse all your proposed employment changes. The contractors, the benefits package, all of it. And he's threatening to sue you personally for breach of fiduciary duty. Claims your emotional breakdown cost the company hundreds of millions. Let him sue. Harrison's voice was flat. What's he going to take? The company I don't have anymore? The reputation that's already destroyed? Your personal assets? Your properties? Your investments? Nancy's voice cracked. Harrison, he's trying to bankrupt you. Completely. The words should have terrified him. A week ago, they would have. But sitting in this hospital waiting room, watching doctors fight to save Elena's life, Harrison found he couldn't summon the energy to care about money. Then I'll be bankrupt, he said simply. Nancy stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Who are you? Because the Harrison Kapoor I've worked for the past 8 years would never. That Harrison Kapoor let a woman die in his house and didn't notice for 6 months, he interrupted. Maybe it's time for a different version. Before Nancy could respond, Dr. Foster emerged from the surgical wing. Harrison and Adrian both shot to their feet. She's alive, Dr. Foster said immediately, and Harrison felt his knees nearly buckle with relief. The treatment worked. Her body's accepting it. But what? Adrian's voice was sharp with fear. The damage from months of untreated illness, malnutrition, overwork, it's extensive. She'll need long-term care. Months of recovery, possibly years. Physical therapy, ongoing treatment, monitoring. Dr. Foster looked at Harrison directly. The kind of care that costs 6 figures annually. And that's assuming no complications. Harrison did the math automatically. 6 figures annually. His company gone. Richard threatening to sue him into poverty. His assets frozen in litigation. He couldn't afford it. For the first time in his adult life, Harrison Kapoor couldn't afford something that mattered. How long does she have before she needs to start the long-term treatment? He asked, his voice surprisingly steady. 2 weeks, maybe 3. After that, if she stops treatment, the improvement we've made will reverse. Quickly, Dr. Foster left them with that sentence hanging in the air like a noose. Adrian turned to Harrison, and there was something broken in his eyes. You can't pay for it, can you? You just lost everything trying to save her, and now you can't finish what you started. I'll find a way. How? Adrian's voice rose, attracting stares from others in the waiting room. You think you can just snap your fingers and magic up hundreds of thousands of dollars? You're not a billionaire anymore, Harrison. You're just another person who can't afford to save someone He stopped, swallowed hard. Someone they care about. The truth of it hit Harrison like a physical blow. He'd sacrificed his empire, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Elena would recover for 2 weeks, start to hope, start to believe she might actually survive. And then she'd fade away because Harrison had played hero without thinking through the ending. I can go back, he said suddenly. To the board. Apologize. Beg for my position back. Richard would love that, seeing me grovel. If I give up the employment reforms, admit I was wrong, maybe they'll. And then what? Adrian's laugh was bitter. You become the man you were before? The man who didn't see my sister dying in front of him? That's your solution? If it keeps her alive. She wouldn't want that. Adrian's shout echoed through the waiting room. Lena would rather die than watch you destroy yourself to save her. Don't you understand? That's who she is. She's been sacrificing herself for everyone else her entire life. She'd rather stop treatment than let you sell your soul. Harrison sank back into his chair, the weight of impossible choices crushing him. Then what do I do? I don't know, Adrian whispered. I don't know. They let Harrison see Elena an hour later. She was awake, color finally returning to her cheeks, monitors beeping steadily instead of screaming. She looked more alive than she had since he'd found her on his library floor. She also looked at him like she knew. Like somehow, through hospital walls and closed doors, she'd heard everything. They voted you out, she said. Not a question. Yes. And now you can't afford my treatment. Harrison wanted to lie. Wanted to tell her everything would be fine, that he'd figure it out, that money didn't matter. But Elena deserved better than comfortable lies. Not long term, he admitted. I have enough for 2, maybe 3 weeks. After that, I stop treatment. Her voice was calm. Too calm. I go home. I live whatever time I have left without bankrupting you further. Elena, no. Harrison. She said his name gently, like she was comforting him instead of sentencing herself to death. You've already given me more than I ever expected. You saw me. You tried. That's more than most people get in their entire lives. It's not enough. The words exploded out of him. You're 31 years old. You have a brother who loves you. You have a whole life ahead of you. And I'm not going to let you die because I was too stupid to plan ahead before I destroyed my company. Elena reached out, took his hand. Her fingers were warm now. Alive. You gave me 2 more weeks than I would have had. 2 weeks where I'm not working myself to death. Where I can rest. Where Adrian can visit me. Her eyes filled with tears. 2 weeks where I feel like I matter to someone. That's not nothing, Harrison. It's not enough, he repeated, but his voice broke this time. Maybe not. Elena squeezed his hand. But it's what we have, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for you. Harrison wanted to rage. Wanted to punch walls, to scream at the universe, to demand a different ending. But Elena was looking at him with such gentle acceptance, such peace with her own death, that his anger had nowhere to go except inward. He'd failed her. After everything, after sacrificing his company and his fortune and his reputation, he'd still failed her. I should go, he said, standing abruptly. Let you rest. Harrison, wait. But he was already moving toward the door, because if he stayed 1 more second, he was going to break completely. And Elena didn't need to watch that. She didn't need to comfort him while she was dying. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall and let the truth wash over him. He'd fallen in love with a woman he couldn't save. Had transformed himself into someone better just in time to watch her slip away. Had learned what actually mattered exactly when he lost the power to protect it. His phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Heard about your maid's prognosis. Shame. If you'd focused on business instead of charity cases, maybe you could have afforded to save her. Some lessons come expensive. Harrison deleted it. Then he threw his phone against the wall and watched it shatter. He had nothing left. No company. No money. No way to save the woman he loved. And 2 weeks until Elena Whitmore died because Harrison Kapoor had learned to be human too late. What would you do if you were Harrison right now? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. You need to see how this ends. Harrison spent that night on a bench outside the hospital. Not because he had nowhere else to go. He still owned his house, at least until Richard's lawyers got to it. But because leaving felt like abandonment. Like if he walked away, even for a few hours, Elena might slip through his fingers entirely. At 3 a.m., someone sat down beside him. He looked up to find Nancy, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look like hell," she said, handing him one. "I feel worse." Harrison took the coffee, let the warmth seep into his hands. "Why are you here, Nancy? I can't pay you anymore. Richard probably already filled my position." "He did. Promoted some kid from finance who's been kissing his ass for 3 years." Nancy sipped her coffee. "I quit." Harrison stared at her. "You what?" "Quit." Told Richard exactly where he could shove his interim CEO position. She smiled grimly. "Felt good, actually. I've wanted to do that for 8 years." "Nancy, that was your career. That was a job." She cut him off. "A job working for a man who treated people like spreadsheet entries. Until he didn't anymore. Until he remembered how to be human." She looked at him directly. "You think I didn't notice Elena? I saw her every time I came to your house for meetings. Watched her work herself into the ground while you didn't even learn her name. I hated you for that, Harrison. But I needed the paycheck, so I stayed." The words stung, but Harrison couldn't argue with them. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me. Apologize by finishing what you started." Nancy pulled out her laptop. "Before I left, I downloaded every file I could from your office, including something interesting from the legal department." She turned the screen toward him. Harrison squinted at the document, his exhausted brain struggling to process what he was seeing. "Is this the original contractor agreement you signed with Elena?" "Yes. And do you see this clause here?" Nancy pointed. "The one that says if a contractor is injured on the job, the employer is liable for all medical costs. Richard's lawyers put that in to protect the company from lawsuits." Harrison's heart started beating faster. Elena wasn't technically injured on the job. She was sick. She collapsed on your property during work hours while performing job duties. That's an on-the-job injury. Nancy's smile was sharp. "And according to this clause, you're not covering her medical costs out of charity, Harrison. You're covering them because you're legally required to. The company's insurance has to pay. But I don't own the company anymore. The injury happened when you did. The liability doesn't disappear just because Richard staged a coup." Nancy closed the laptop. "I already called 3 lawyers. They all agree. You have a case. A strong one. The company's insurance policy has to cover Elena's treatment. All of it. Long-term care included." For the first time in 12 hours, Harrison felt something other than despair. Hope. Fragile, terrifying hope. Richard will fight this. He'll tie it up in court for months. Let him. "I also made some calls to friends in journalism." Nancy's smile turned dangerous. "Turns out they're very interested in a story about a billionaire CEO who fired his predecessor for trying to provide health care to a woman dying from overwork. The optics aren't great, Harrison. Especially in an election year." Harrison stared at her. "You're blackmailing Richard Chun." "I'm applying pressure strategically." Nancy shrugged. "You taught me that. I'm just using it for something that actually matters." Before Harrison could respond, his phone, the broken one he'd thrown against the wall, buzzed in his pocket. He'd forgotten about it. Pulled it out to find the screen shattered, but somehow still functional. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk Mr. Kapoor, this is Dr. Patel from County General. I heard about Elena Whitmore's case from Dr. Foster. I run a clinical trial for long-term autoimmune treatment, fully funded by federal grants. If Ms. Whitmore qualifies, all costs covered for 2 years. Call me, asterisk. Harrison read the message 3 times, certain he was hallucinating from exhaustion. "Nancy." His voice shook. "Look at this." She read the text, and her eyes widened. "Call him. Right now." Dr. Patel answered on the first ring. "Mr. Kapoor, I was hoping you'd call quickly. The clinical trial, is this real?" "Very real. We're studying long-term outcomes for patients with autoimmune conditions who've experienced acute crises due to delayed treatment. Ms. Whitmore's case is exactly what we're looking for." Dr. Patel's voice was kind. "I'll be honest, Dr. Foster told me about your situation, about what you've sacrificed. I wanted to help. I don't understand. If this trial exists, why didn't Dr. Foster mention it before?" "Because Ms. Whitmore didn't qualify before. Her condition wasn't acute enough, ironically. But after the experimental treatment and the crisis response, her case profile changed. She qualifies now." Harrison felt tears burning his eyes. "When can we start?" "I'd like to evaluate her tomorrow. If everything checks out, we can begin immediately." The trial covers everything: medication, monitoring, physical therapy, even housing assistance if needed. Thank you. The words were completely inadequate. Dr. Patel, I don't know how to. You already did, Mr. Kapoor. You saved her life when you didn't have to. You lost everything to give her a chance. That kind of character? That's rare. I'm just making sure the story has a better ending. When Harrison hung up, Nancy was crying. See? She said, wiping her eyes. Maybe the universe doesn't completely suck. Harrison laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and hysteria. I need to tell her. I need to tell Elena. It's 4 a.m., Harrison. Let her sleep. Tell her in the morning, when you can see her face. Nancy stood, pulled him to his feet. Come on. I'm taking you to my place. You need to shower and sleep and not look like a homeless person when you give her the good news. Nancy, don't argue. You smell like hospital waiting room and broken dreams. Elena deserves better than that when you tell her she's going to live. Harrison showed up at Elena's room at 8 a.m., showered and changed, carrying flowers he'd bought from the hospital gift shop. His hands were shaking so badly, he almost dropped them twice. Elena was awake, staring out the window. Adrian sat beside her, holding her hand. They both looked like they'd been crying. Hey, Harrison said softly. Elena turned, and her smile was sad. Hey, come to say goodbye. No. Harrison moved closer, set the flowers on the table. I came to tell you that you're going to live. Actually live. For years. Decades. Elena's expression flickered with something painful. Harrison, we talked about this. False hope isn't. It's not false. He pulled out his phone, showed her Dr. Patel's text. There's a clinical trial. Fully funded. You qualify. Dr. Patel wants to evaluate you today. Elena read the text, then read it again. This is real. It's real. And Nancy found a legal angle. The company's insurance has to cover your current treatment because you were injured on the job. Richard can't refuse without destroying himself publicly. Adrian grabbed the phone, read the message, and let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. Lena, do you understand? You're going to be okay. But Elena wasn't looking at the phone anymore. She was looking at Harrison, and tears were streaming down her face. You didn't give up, she whispered. Even when it was hopeless. Even when I'd accepted it. You didn't give up. Harrison crossed the room, knelt beside her bed, took her hand. I couldn't. Because somewhere between finding you on my floor and watching you fight for your life, I fell in love with you. And I wasn't ready to lose you. Elena's breath caught. Harrison, I know it's too soon. I know I don't deserve you. I know I'm the man who ignored you for 6 months and almost killed you through indifference. His voice cracked. But I'm also the man who's going to spend the rest of his life making sure you never doubt your worth again. If you'll let me. For a long moment, Elena just stared at him. Then she pulled him up, pulled him close, and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, tasting of salt and tears and second chances. When she pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. I'm going to make you work for this, she said. I'm going to make you prove every day that you mean it. Good, Harrison said. I deserve that. Adrian cleared his throat. I'm still in the room, and I'm still deciding if I approve of this. Elena laughed, the first real laugh Harrison had heard from her, and the sound filled something in his chest he hadn't known was empty. Then I guess I better start proving myself to both of you, Harrison said. Yeah, Adrian said, but he was smiling. You better. Oh my goodness, things are finally looking up. But we're not done yet. Drop a comment telling me what you think happens next. And subscribe if you haven't already because the conclusion is going to blow your mind. Dr. Patel evaluated Elena that afternoon and confirmed what Harrison had desperately hoped. She was a perfect candidate for the trial. Within hours, the paperwork was filed, the treatment plan established, and Elena's future secured for the next 2 years. But Harrison wasn't satisfied with just survival. He wanted justice. 3 days later, he walked into the headquarters of Kapoor Industries for the first time since the board had voted him out. Security moved to stop him, but Harrison held up a folder. I'm here to see Richard Chun. Tell him I have documents he'll want to see before they go public. The guard hesitated, made a call, and 5 minutes later Harrison was being escorted to the top floor, his floor, once, to the office that used to be his. Richard sat behind Harrison's desk, looking perfectly comfortable in Harrison's chair, wearing a smile that made Harrison's blood boil. Harrison, this is unexpected. Richard gestured to a chair like he was granting a favor. I heard your maid survived. How touching. Her name is Elena. Harrison didn't sit. And I'm not here to ask for anything. I'm here to tell you what's going to happen. Richard's smile widened. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, you have no leverage. No company. No money. No. I have a lawyer. And a very interesting interpretation of contractor law. Harrison dropped the folder on the desk. Elena's medical costs, all of them, including long-term care, are the company's legal responsibility. She was injured on the job. Your insurance policy covers it. Richard barely glanced at the folder. We'll fight that in court. It'll take years. Which is why I'm offering you a deal. Harrison leaned forward, hands flat on the desk. You approve Elena's medical coverage through the company insurance. You also approve benefits packages for every contractor in this company. Health insurance, living wages, maximum work hours. Everything I proposed. And why would I do that? Richard laughed. You have nothing to bargain with. I have a story. Harrison pulled out his phone, opened an email. From 3 separate major news outlets. All very interested in running a piece about how the new CEO of Kapoor Industries fired his predecessor for trying to save a dying woman. About how that woman was working 3 jobs, 70 hours a week, while earning minimum wage from a billion-dollar company. Richard's smile faltered. That's slander. It's fact. Documented fact. Harrison scrolled through the email. They also have interest in your personal finances. Funny thing, Nancy was very thorough before she quit. She found some interesting discrepancies in your expense reports. Luxury trips charged to the company. Personal purchases on the corporate card. Nothing illegal, but ethically questionable for a man now claiming to prioritize fiscal responsibility. The color drained from Richard's face. You're bluffing. Try me. Harrison's voice was ice. I have nothing left to lose, Richard. You already took my company. But I will burn every bridge, expose every secret, and destroy every shred of reputation you have if you don't approve these changes. Elena will get her coverage one way or another, through the insurance or through a lawsuit that will drag this company's name through the mud for years. This is blackmail. This is negotiation. You taught me that. Harrison straightened. You have 24 hours to decide. Approve the coverage and the reforms, or watch everything you've built crumble on national television. Your choice. He walked out without waiting for an answer. Nancy called him the next morning. He approved it. Everything. Elena's coverage, the contractor reforms, all of it. Harrison closed his eyes, let relief wash over him. Did he seem angry? Furious. But he also looked scared. Nancy paused. The board's calling an emergency meeting. Word is some members aren't happy with how Richard handled things. They're questioning whether he's the right choice for CEO. Good. Harrison meant it. He should be questioned. They all should. Harrison. Nancy's voice turned soft. What are you going to do now? You can't get your company back. Richard made sure of that. Harrison thought about it. A week ago, the idea of losing his company would have destroyed him. Now, I'm going to figure out how to be someone Elena Whitmore deserves, he said simply. Everything else is just details. When Harrison arrived at the hospital that afternoon, he found Elena out of bed for the first time, sitting in a chair by the window. Color had returned to her face. Her eyes were bright. She looked alive in a way he'd never seen. Hey, she said, smiling when she saw him. I heard you threatened to destroy Richard Chun on national television. News travels fast. Adrian has a friend who works in your building. Had a friend, I guess, since it's not your building anymore. Elena's smile turned mischievous. Apparently you were terrifying. Very Gordon Gekko. I prefer to think of it as channeling my inner anti-hero. Harrison sat beside her, took her hand. It was warm, strong, alive. How are you feeling? Like I might actually have a future. Elena squeezed his fingers. The trial starts next week. Dr. Patel says if it goes well, I could be in remission within 6 months. And then what? And then I figure out what Elena Whitmore wants to be when she grows up. She laughed softly. I've been surviving for so long. I forgot to think about actually living. Harrison understood that feeling. He'd been accumulating success for so long. He'd forgotten to think about what made life worth living. I have an idea, he said. If you're interested. Should I be worried? Probably. Harrison pulled out his phone, showed her a business plan he'd been working on for the past 2 days. A nonprofit, helping people like you, immigrants, contractors, people working multiple jobs just to survive. Legal aid, medical assistance, job training, advocacy for labor rights. I want to call it the Whitmore Foundation. Elena's eyes widened. Harrison, I can't. That's too much. It's not enough. He turned the phone so she could read better. But it's a start. I have some money left from my personal accounts. Enough to get it running. And I have time now. So much time. He looked at her directly. I want to spend it building something that actually matters. With you. If you'll help me. Tears filled Elena's eyes. You want to name a foundation after me? I want to name it after the woman who taught me what strength really looks like. Who worked 3 jobs and sent money to her brother and still found the energy to make my house beautiful every morning. Harrison's voice cracked. You changed my life, Elena. Let me honor that. Elena pulled him close, kissed him softly. Okay, she whispered. Yes. When I'm healthy enough, when I'm strong enough. Yes. There's no rush. We have time now. Time. Elena said the word like it was precious, miraculous. I didn't think I'd have more time. You have all the time in the world. Harrison rested his forehead against hers. And I'm going to spend every second of it making sure you never doubt how extraordinary you are. Behind them, someone cleared their throat. Harrison turned to find Adrian standing in the doorway, arms crossed, expression stern. But his eyes were smiling. Dr. Patel says she needs rest, Adrian said. Not a marriage proposal. I wasn't. Harrison started, then stopped. Actually, give me 6 months and I might be. Elena laughed, and Adrian groaned. But Harrison saw the approval in the younger man's eyes. 6 months, Adrian said. And I'm watching you, Kapoor. You hurt my sister, and medical school has taught me 50 ways to hide a body. Noted. Harrison stood, kissed Elena's forehead. I should let you rest. But I'll be back tomorrow. And the day after. And every day after that. If you'll have me. I'll have you, Elena said softly. Just, maybe leave the corporate takeover threats at home next time. No promises. As Harrison left the hospital, his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Kapoor? This is Margaret Ross. From the board. Harrison's jaw tightened. What do you want, Margaret? I want to apologize. For voting against you. For not standing up when Richard tried to destroy you. She paused. Several board members feel the same way. We've been talking, and we'd like to discuss reinstating you as CEO. A week ago, this call would have been everything. Now, no. Harrison said simply. No? But Mr. Kapoor, the company needs to figure out how to succeed without exploiting people. If Richard can't do that, find someone who can. But it's not going to be me. Harrison looked back at the hospital, at the window where Elena sat bathed in afternoon light. I found something more important than an empire, Margaret. I found a reason to be better. He hung up, turned off his phone, and walked toward his future, uncertain, unplanned, and absolutely perfect. 6 months later, Elena stood in front of a mirror in a dress that actually fit her. Not the oversized uniform she'd worn for 6 months while cleaning Harrison's house. Not the hospital gowns that had become her second skin. A real dress, deep blue like twilight, that hugged curve she'd finally regained after months of proper nutrition and care. Behind her reflection, Adrian appeared in the doorway of her new apartment. A modest 1-bedroom in a safe neighborhood that she actually chose herself, not the cheapest option she could find. You look beautiful, Lena, Adrian said, and his eyes were suspiciously bright. Mom would have loved this. Elena touched the necklace at her throat, her mother's, the only jewelry she'd kept through everything. She would have lectured me about falling for my employer. She would have lectured you about almost dying and not telling your brother. Adrian crossed the room, hugged her tight. But then she would have forgiven you. Like I did. Elena hugged him back, breathing in the familiar scent of her baby brother who wasn't so little anymore. In 2 months, he'd graduate medical school, top of his class, full scholarship courtesy of the Whitmore Foundation. Harrison had insisted. Elena had cried for an hour. Are you nervous? Adrian asked, pulling back. Terrified. Elena smiled. It's a good kind of terrified, though. The kind that means something matters. He matters to you. Yeah. Elena looked at her reflection again, at the woman who'd survived, who'd fought, who'd learned, finally, that accepting help wasn't weakness. He really does. The Whitmore Foundation's grand opening was held in a renovated warehouse in downtown. Nothing like the sleek corporate offices Harrison used to inhabit, but somehow more real, more honest. The space hummed with purpose. Legal aid stations, job training centers, medical consultation rooms, childcare facilities. 140 people had already been helped in the 3 months since soft launch. 140 Elena Whitmores who'd been working themselves to death in silence. Harrison stood at the entrance, greeting donors and volunteers, and Elena's heart did something complicated in her chest when she saw him. He'd traded his Tom Ford shirts for simple button-downs, sold the mansion, and moved into a modest house. Given up everything he'd spent 12 years building. And he'd never looked happier. "You made it," Harrison said when he spotted her, his face transforming with a smile that still made her knees weak. "I was starting to think you'd changed your mind. I was just fashionably late." Elena took his offered hand. "Someone told me that's what powerful women do." Someone was very wise. Harrison kissed her knuckles, and the gesture was so tender that Elena felt tears threaten. 6 months together, and he still looked at her like she was precious, like she mattered more than anything in the world. Nancy appeared beside them, clipboard in hand, looking far more relaxed than she ever had working for Kapoor Industries. "We're ready whenever you are." "Everyone's waiting." Harrison looked at Elena. "Together?" Elena squeezed his hand. Together. They stood on a small stage at the front of the warehouse, facing a crowd of donors, volunteers, former employees of Harrison's company, and people who'd already been helped by the foundation. Elena spotted faces she recognized from the hospital, from her old restaurant job, from the overnight custodial crew. People who knew what it meant to be invisible. "Thank you all for coming," Harrison began, his voice steady but emotional. 6 months ago, I was a billionaire who thought success meant how much money I could accumulate. I was wrong about almost everything that mattered. And I was especially wrong about this woman beside me. He turned to Elena, and the love in his eyes made her breath catch. "Elena Whitmore taught me that strength isn't about how much you can take. It's about how much you give even when you have nothing left." She worked 3 jobs, sent money to her brother, and still made my house beautiful every morning. And I never once said thank you. I never saw her. Harrison's voice cracked, but he kept going. Until the day she collapsed on my floor, and I finally understood that the most important thing in life isn't building empires. It's seeing the people right in front of us. It's choosing humanity over profit. It's remembering that behind every transaction, every contract, every paycheck, there's a person with dreams and fears and a family who loves them. The room was silent except for quiet sniffles. The Whitmore Foundation exists because one woman's courage changed my life. Because she survived when she shouldn't have. Because she taught me that it's never too late to become someone better. Harrison took Elena's hand. This foundation will help people like Elena. People working multiple jobs, people choosing between medicine and food, people who've been made invisible by a system that values profit over humanity. And we're going to do it by remembering the most important lesson Elena taught me. Everyone deserves to be seen. The room erupted in applause. Elena's vision blurred with tears, but she stepped forward anyway. "I'm not good at public speaking," she said, and the crowd laughed gently. 6 months ago, I was dying. I'd convinced myself that my worth was measured by how much I could endure, how little space I could take up, how invisible I could be. I thought asking for help was weakness. She looked at Harrison, then at Adrian in the crowd, then at Nancy and Dr. Patel, and all the faces who'd saved her life in different ways. I was wrong too. Asking for help isn't weakness, it's courage. And accepting that you matter, that your life has value beyond what you can produce for others, that's revolutionary. Elena's voice grew stronger. This foundation isn't about charity. It's about dignity. It's about making sure no one else has to choose between their health and their survival. It's about building a world where being human is enough. The applause was deafening this time. As it faded, Harrison pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box that made Elena's heart stop. "I had a whole plan for this," Harrison said, dropping to one knee while the crowd gasped. "A romantic dinner, a perfect sunset, probably some dramatic music. But standing here, in this place we built together, surrounded by people whose lives we're actually changing, this feels right." Elena's hands flew to her mouth. "Elena Whitmore, you saved my life when you collapsed on my floor. You taught me what actually matters. You showed me that it's never too late to become the person you were always meant to be." Harrison opened the box, revealing a simple, perfect ring. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I see you, that I value you, that I love you more than any empire I could build?" Elena was crying openly now, nodding before she could find words. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, Harrison. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that felt like coming home. The crowd erupted again, but Elena barely heard it. All she could hear was her own heartbeat, steady and strong, and Harrison's whispered words against her lips. Thank you for teaching me how to be human. 3 months later, Elena stood in a small garden behind Harrison's house, their house now, wearing a simple white dress and her mother's necklace. Adrian walked her down the aisle toward Harrison, who looked at her like she'd hung the stars. The wedding was small. Nancy was there, and Dr. Patel, and some of the people the foundation had helped. No billionaires. No board members. Just people who actually mattered. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Adrian raised his hand. Harrison's eyes widened in panic until Adrian grinned and said, I object to waiting any longer. Get on with it. Everyone laughed, and Elena felt something release in her chest. The last bit of fear that this was temporary, that happiness this perfect couldn't last. But as Harrison said his vows, promising to see her every day for the rest of their lives, promising to build a world where people like her didn't have to choose between surviving and living, Elena finally believed it. She'd survived. She'd fought. She'd learned to take up space. And now, finally, she was going to live. I love you, Harrison said as they were pronounced husband and wife. Thank you for saving me. We saved each other, Elena whispered back. That's how it works. They kissed, and the small crowd cheered, and somewhere in heaven Elena imagined her parents smiling. She'd made it. Against all odds, through all the darkness, she'd made it to the light. And she was never going invisible again. What an incredible journey, right? From a man who couldn't even see his housekeeper to a couple changing the world together. That's the power of actually seeing each other. Thank you so much for being here with me through this whole story. If it touched your heart, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me your favorite part, and make sure you're subscribed because I have so many more stories that will shake you to your core. Where are you watching from? Let me know below. Until next time, beautiful souls, remember to see the people around you. You never know whose life you might save. Much love. Red Heart.